Welcome back, beautiful women, to week 3 of Energize Your Life. I want to begin talking again about some anatomy stuff that this is kind of perfect timing because hopefully you'll be on some sort of a regular schedule, so you can look at like a monthly cycle of approximately 4 weeks and see where you fall on that cycle over the next 4 weeks. So this is kind of a good time to start, just also knowing that you're either shorter or longer than that, and that's also within normal. So this week we are focused on being woman sourced. We are going to really get into the nitty gritty of how our periods are coming and going, and how we can really kind of take ownership of that aspect so that we have really nice periods that we work with that are not painful, that we kind of are able to, when we're having our period, to rest with them and to feel the divine wisdom that comes during that restful period of time, which should generally and ideally be only about 4 days if we're being able to do as much abdominal massage as we can. And that we track and see where we are when we ovulate, especially if you're someone who's trying to conceive, or if you're using, of course, like any of those methods where you're using it not to conceive, which, of course, all contraception has its downsides. As a midwife, I saw tons of unplanned pregnancies when people were on the pill and the IUD, but it's a great way to keep in touch with where your fertility is, and how to do that. There are some amazing apps that can help you do that. You can also really get into hopefully telling when you ovulate by kind of feeling what is around your cervix. If you see or feel cervical mucus and kind of are able to, you're not grossed out by it, but you're one of those people who's able to pick it up between your thumb and your finger and like pull it apart and see how, strong it is and long it is. Some people just get really into checking their ovulation that way. And it's just kind of interesting. And then also being able to see how healthy your periods are, which is just going to be such an easier way to live. And it's a sign of health to have a period that's, only around 3 to 4 days, and that is a really nice, rich red color that doesn't have a lot of clotting, and there's not a lot of dark or pink or watery serous fluid, but that your uterus is working really well. It's just a way to be able to honor your body and to, get some health back going. I choose not to use tampons. It's a lot easier for all the blood to come out when you're not stopping it up. Sometimes I have to, but in general, I like to use just, whatever pad I can use. I used to just use cloth, but that kind of became its own thing that I really didn't want to do anymore. But I used to have cloth pads that I soaked in a vase full of water and then gave that water to my plants, and they really thrived off of it. It's just kind of like, a nutrient. So there are a lot of ways that you can honor having your period. I do a lot of free bleeding, and that means sitting on a red towel and just like letting it flow and just relaxing and not having to worry about changing a pad or, changing sheets, just kind of letting it come out for a while, especially on a heavy day. I just find it helpful. And but it's whatever is easiest and best for you. But about this time, I think, start tracking your cycle, see where you're at over these next few remaining weeks. And if you have any questions, ask me on the call, share with each other. If you have questions about what apps you like or what you like best about about tracking your cycle. It also kind of helps to sometimes to track your mood. Um, I don't like to get into this concept of like everybody's bitchy on her period. And, that's not, I don't find that empowering or helpful. Everybody can be bitchy or having a hard time at any time. Sometimes things get highlighted during a full moon experience. Things really come to a head and come into their fullness. And that's true when you're having your period. It's sort of like the full moon phase, but not always. If you're having some mega hormonal fluctuations, you can track those too. Like if you're feeling wild outbursts of anger or grief, it's good to track those. But please don't feel like anything is set in stone. You're going through a transformational process. So for gosh sakes, expect the detox, expect, even the backlash that I was telling you about with saying, once you start putting up some boundaries, expect people to kind of push back. My mom, who's a really beautiful Kundalini yogi, has to remind me, like, according to Kundalini Yoga, we are in the end of a Kali Yuga, which means we're in the end of like 26,000 year cycle or something where great change is happening, and it's the Aquarian age, and it's going to be upheaval, and that's what it kind of looks like. So, keep that in mind. I think it's better to be prepared than to, especially if you've experienced trauma, than to constantly be re-shocked by everything. So the Kriya that I want to introduce this week is the sciatic nerve and pelvic alignment Kriya. Having an aligned pelvis is very healthy for your body. It's very healthy for you as a woman. It helps you achieve deep orgasm. Sciatic nerve health is important, especially if you've had sciatic nerve weirdness from being pregnant. I know I did. It was one of the worst pains ever. And pelvic alignment is cross-culturally another really important way to be healthy. This is true not only in Eastern, yoga traditions, but also with craniosacral therapy. It's kind of like the pelvis mimics the cranium, and it's kind of like how we first get formed in the womb, and there are a lot of interesting philosophies behind it. But anyway, I want you to try this Kriya out for the week and see how you like it, see how it goes, compare it with the other ones. We have started doing our cycle and remembering that our cycle tells a story. And I had you either read or do the exercise from writing down the bones, the automatic writing and the writing without picking up the pen. You can either, read that if you haven't yet and do that exercise if you haven't. But also tracking your cycle, allowing it to be a story, see how it changes, see how it's talking to you. I think it's a really empowering thing to do. And it's a great tool to figure out, what's going on in your life. We talked a little bit also about why we need a healthy uterus. This is kind of going back over the past couple of weeks. There are spiral muscles that mirror our spiral journey as women. Anytime there is collapsing in this chakra, it leads to hemorrhage of energy, losing chi. It's really important to keep it functioning well because it's connected to our brain. It's how we can experience, joy and deep relaxation and connection and empathy using utilizing our own capabilities of oxytocin, which is a hormone that originates in the brain but is also controlled in the uterus. There are feedback mechanisms in the uterus. So please continue to do your Mayan abdominal massage and, chart and see how that's going. I'm really big on women not being in pain anymore. Um, pain is an indication, pain during your period is an indication that something's not right and that your uterus is probably severely displaced. So this is another reason that the that both the yoga, getting your pelvis in the right place, and the massage, getting your uterus in the right place, should help you not be in so much pain anymore. Of course, the disclaimer is that, pelvic pain, it's one of the hardest things to diagnose. And so it's really important that you go see a care provider. And if you need an ultrasound, that you feel like you can get an ultrasound and make sure there's nothing super serious going on. If you have a history of giant cysts or whatever it is, make sure that you talk to me about that and make sure that you're getting care for that, because you're going to have to really dial down how hard you do your massage in that case. Cysts are pretty common. People can pass them every month. They can be very painful. But the more that you're able to, massage your ovaries, the more that you're able to really be tonifying the whole area, you should feel like you're making progress just by being able to take care of yourself in this way. Ovarian cysts are very dangerous, so I still want you to see, an obstetrician or somebody to make sure that it's kind of just hanging out and not getting worse. I had a ruptured ovarian cyst that I almost died from. Those are unmistakable because you're in so much pain, you can't talk, and you usually come close to passing out because you lose blood so quickly. So I understand the ramifications of having unhealthy ovaries, and I know that it's nothing to play around with. I also know that being able to do the Mayan abdominal massage on your uterus and on your ovaries will help kind of bring some blood flow back and really bring some attention back to that area. Again, if you have questions or if you have something serious going on, please talk to me about it. Another thing that's really cool about tracking your period is that, women are supposedly like the moon. Like, we go in phases. Like, we have an ovulation phase, we have a non-fertile phase, we have an emptying out phase. And it's the same as the cycle of the moon. The moon is, 28 or so days. Our cycle optimally should be 28 or so days. In fact, once we start tracking it and once we start doing the Mayan abdominal massage, we should see an improvement toward a cycle that is closer to 28 days than like 32 or 23. You should get way more regular. And it's nice also to know what's happening when. So the moon is really mirroring our lives as women. It is part of the divine feminine. And there is a theory that before there were ultraviolet or fluorescent lights, that all women, or really, I guess, any artificial light, before artificial light was developed, that all women had a cycle by the moon because our pituitary master gland was not interrupted by artificial light. So I just think that's very interesting. And I think it is something to think about when we start moving into some practices around sleep, which hopefully we can get into. If I forget to talk about it enough, please, when we're on a call, let's talk about how to get better sleep. I'll usually tell you it has something to do with getting blackout curtains, and if you need like a sound, like a sound machine or something like that, or valerian root at night, which would be an additional herb to add if you're just not sleeping. But a lot of rebirth and detoxing happens at night, and hormones happen at night. And getting adequate rest is obviously really important for having adequate energy. And yes, not having artificial light, and especially not having the light of your phone, which I'm really guilty of, is important to getting a good night's sleep. It just affects your pituitary to the point that it just can't regulate. It just gets weird. So let's keep that in mind as we sort of move through the chakras and move into creating more energy for ourselves. There's a couple of really neat books that I want to offer for you to read, and then we can kind of discuss, or we can have anybody who's reading them and wants to talk about them can. These are recommended by a dear friend of mine named Dr. Jacqueline Thomas, who does a lot of work around the divine feminine. She has a PhD in literature. She really insists that Blood, Bread, and Roses is a great book, as well as From the Beast to the Blonde. Just talk about feminine embodiment, and just another way to get close to the feminine aspects of our bodies and of ourselves. And I've read a lot of books like these lately. But I feel like they're kind of stuck in the 70s. They're kind of like the 70s, 80s women who run with the wolves type stuff that kind of feels a little dated to me. And these are kind of cool, like academic-y books that I think have a lot of practicality, and it's part of our masculine yang practice to read those, I think. So if you have some time this week, feel free to do that, and then we can all talk about them. I want to get back into how the feminine body and brain works, and how I feel like once we get our oxytocin back on board, by using these herbs, using any of the yoni tools, just reconnecting with our body, we have our own medicine in our bodies. And this is how we can kind of heal our own adrenals, by resting and by bringing in the good hormones. You can't have oxytocin and, the stressed out hormone going on at the same time. That doesn't work. It's one or the other. And so if you're constantly in a state of fight or flight or stress, you're not getting the oxytocin, and you're not able to heal your adrenals or feel rested. But because the soul craves movement, because we need some form of energy, we can sometimes be addicted to that masculine path of doing, and it becomes like a stress, because it's like a mechanism of using it to get energy. It's not really. It's just a way that we start being more and more addicted to it. It's sort of like, oh, this is how, because we're not sourced enough, this is kind of what we have to create stress to create movement, because otherwise we're like too tired to do anything else. And stress is like a way for us to have to step into some forward motion. And of course, some amount of stress is needed in life to, is healthy. It's sort of like what forms our bones is stress, and our teeth is the imprint actually of birth, is one of the, there's just sort of one of the thoughts is that we imprint our teeth at birth because it's just a really, really difficult, stressful transition from being in the womb to outer life. So there are good aspects of stress, but we are, for the most part, on the side of stress that has been so constant that there's been no relief. And so we really want to pay attention to those moments where we feel like we're creating something because we have to. We're creating it out of stress. Like it becomes an addiction to, it's like, well, that's how we use, these hormonal energies, instead of being able to access and have more oxytocin on board and be more breath sourced. that's really where we want to move more into. And being able to have these herbs should also help you as well. So when we, again, do the exercise, the Kriya, to align the hips, that's like where we can get the deeper orgasm. So this is sort of progressing from last week, from sort of awakening the senses, awakening the tissues, awakening the yoni using the steam, and if you choose to, the yoni egg, and moving into the hips, this entire area. And it's really important to be able to create a lot of oxytocin and create a lot of powerful deep energy. It's just one of the best things about being a woman. So talking again about the uterus and the whole area and getting back to the pituitary as well, the pituitary is what commands your second chakra. So one of the great things about doing the work on the uterus is that if you've been bleeding without catching up, this is one way that you can, stop having that happen. You don't have this, what they call wandering womb, which is sort of supposed to mimic your brain just being all over the place, your mind being all over the place, your emotions being all over the place. Like you're really in command of that second chakra. So you're feeling good, and you're feeling resourced, and you're feeling powerful as a woman. And it is related to the pituitary, which is the sixth chakra. And I want you to really start thinking about how to get better sleep, so that your pituitary gets back on board as well, and it kind of all can work together. And this is also backtracking into craniosacral therapy philosophy, which is that you can't get your brain into the right place until you get your heart into the right place. And your heart can't be in the right place if your sacrum is not in the right place. And so again, it's a cross-cultural reference to health of the pelvis and health of the brain. They always go together. So please start to figure out how you can honor that, how you can find a way to do your massage, how you can find a way to be better to your body. The other thing that I would like to talk about is how we are water sourced. There is a beautiful Kundalini practice called Ishnan, which helps heal the thyroid. So thyroid is another gland like the pituitary that has a lot to do with how energized we are able to feel. Ishnan, in my opinion, not only heals the thyroid, but it's also something that heals the overall body. It's like a Wim Hof practice. I don't know if you've heard of Wim Hof or cryotherapies. It's basically cryotherapy, but it's not as intense. It's not like you have to do an ice bath. Ishnan is more gentle than that. And in my opinion, Ishnan heals weird inflammatory stuff. That is it is another thing I rely on every time I feel like I'm getting something weird happening, not like a sickness, but something related to inflammation, like interstitial cystitis is back, or my throat's hurting, or my, whatever the weird kind of off-kilter thing is starting up. Or I feel like, I just need more help with my body. Like it feels kind of like sluggish. Ishnan always works. It is not fun. It is especially not fun at first. It takes a while to get used to. It was my biggest fear in Kundalini teacher training. I never thought I would do it. Never, 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 never in a million years, never. And it's taking a cold shower, and it's really directing the cold water on the thyroid. And I'm grateful that I have it. It's a 15-minute practice, start to finish, in the cold, and you should receive the PDF about it. So here you'll see that we're moving into really healing the whole body, the whole glandular system, and really getting into, starting with healing our wombs, and then really like now I want to see you feeling a lot better overall. Start doing your Ishnan. It shouldn't really take that long to get used to. It is a harder practice to get into because if you're not excited about cold showers, it can just be super scary. At least it was for me. But it's also one of the best things that I've ever done. And you'll usually hear that if you talk to Kundalini yogis who do Ishnan. You'll usually hear that it's been one of the most powerful things of any practice they've ever done is the 15-minute cold shower. So as we're talking about water, I think it's important, as we know, we all need to be drinking a lot of water to help just kind of flush out our system. But you want to be careful with, again, extreme uses of water, like reverse osmosis. If you're going to drink a lot of reverse osmosis water, you're going to have to add minerals back into your supplements somehow. Just doing RO water all day long will deplete the crap out of you. Vortexing water is a huge deal in the Mayan tradition, especially with spiritual bathing. And then, of course, you have the science experiments where you talk to your water nicely and you see, one water looking beautiful and one water looking like really crazy and all moldy. Water is something that I really want you to get into a little bit more deeply now. If you're going to start doing the Ishnan and you're going to really start drinking water, there is a popular raw foodist theory, the Gabriel Cousens, Dr. Cousens, who's sort of the guru of raw foods, did, I think, have an interesting take on water, which was like, you can vortex it, you can put it in different colored bottles. Kundalini, a lot of the time we use like blue water bottles. Glass bottles, of course, are best, but whatever you can do. But the interesting thing is he's like, don't mess with it. Filter it, use spring water, but really be careful on like the radical, like using distilled water or using reverse osmosis water. Just find a pure source as you can and drink it. It is it's an important addition to your healing. And we did talk a little bit about when you are doing these practices as an empath, as soon as you start to become spiritually stronger and as soon as you start to write out what you want to have happen, and make your vows to yourself, then exactly what's going to pop up is what you're trying to release, whether it's like hateful people or a difficult job or whatever it is. You'll sort of get the residue from that. And I'm sorry, it always seems to be a lot harder than it should be. But we expect detox, especially when doing Ishnan, and especially when you do these kriyas, you should, even just by doing like a 10 to 20 minute kriyas or whatever they are after doing the breath of fire, and especially after including Ishnan, you will probably feel very cold because you will have layers and layers of disease and heat leave your body. And that's like detoxing. But with the Ishnan, it's extremely gentle and it's just a little bit of yoga. It's like a little dabble do ya. You do not have to get extreme. You will still see results. And I want you to talk about those. I want to also talk about how what I hear a lot from women who feel like they have hormonal weirdness is that what I want to say is not everybody is in menopause. Not everybody is in perimenopause. Even if you've had a baby, even if you haven't had a baby, sometimes you are in early menopause. And sometimes there's a way that you can kind of extend that because you're supposed to be like 56. You're not supposed to be 30. But if women are told that, or if women have taken a lot of hormonal replacement therapies or the pill, I don't think it's that you're in menopause. I think it's that you're in hormonal fluctuations, which happen our entire lives as women. They happen when we first start our period. They happen when our breasts keep growing. They happen when we get pregnant. They happen when we breastfeed. They happen if we don't get pregnant. They happen if we don't breastfeed. Like, the idea that we're stagnant in one way is very masculine, and it's not reflective of how our bodies work. Having said that, unless you are currently not bleeding and have not been bleeding in a long time and are sort of over that, I'm going to assume that we're not in menopause. That unless you're over 56 or around that age, you're still having a cycle and you're still fertile as well. I have lots of stories about people being told that they had absolutely no progesterone by like a fertility doctor, and there was no chance of them ever getting pregnant, and they have a thriving baby. So I kind of only know that part of the bell curve. So anyway, when we get to next week, we will talk more about how I am hoping that you've all built some beautiful relationships with one another. And I look forward to seeing you soon.